I'm reading from the works of Olive Schreiner. I have sought, for long years I have labored, but I have not found her. I have not rested, I have not repined, and I have not seen her. Now my strength is gone. Where I lie down worn out, other men will stand, young and fresh. By the steps that I have cut, they will climb. By the stairs that I have built, they will mount. They will never know the name of the man who made them. At the clumsy work, they will laugh. When the stones roll, they will curse me. But they will mount, and on my work, they will climb, and by my stair, they will find her, and through me. That was the seeker after truth speaking. Let the words of my mouth that proceed from the meditation of my heart find favor with you, O God, the creator of the living substance of life. Amen. This is the last in our series dealing with what it means to be a congregation and worship and how those two relate. I did not know that when I would give this last in our series dealing with worship and redemption, it would also be the day of the Gay Pride Parade. But in many ways, at least initially, the Gay Pride events really reflected the embodiment of this idea of worship as redemption. For the first parades, the first celebrations, especially the one in New York, which came the year after Stonewall, was an affirmation of inheritance by those who had been disinherited. In fact, the first gay pride parades carried with them the idea of freedom, of liberation, of coming out of the closet, of affirming what God had done, affirming one's identity, one's reality as a gift from God, in spite of what the society said. And it provided those early parades a sense of joy, a sense of affirmation, a sense of aliveness. People had come alive from the death of which many of them had been buried because of social impositions. And so there was, in those early parades, a great sense of vibrancy and vitality, a great affirmation of life, a sense of peace and joy came forth. And I think many of us hunger for that same sense of peace and joy. It is foundational to, I think, our search for meaning and to find the truth, to search for that eternal reality. It is part of that struggling, as Reverend Benton said, to reach that crown that the Creator of life has placed over our heads, to grow tall enough to wear it. And what the legacy of martyrs tells me, what the legacies of many seekers and prophets of old, what the legacies tell me is that it is possible for me too to have this sense of peace, to have this sense of joy. You look at the biographies of the great folks, the great souls who contributed so much to society, you always find a sense of calm or of peace, of being filled with a sense of presence and joy and affirmation. Look at the life of Bonhoeffer, Gandhi, others. there is revealed in their lives a sense of confidence and assurance, a sense of joy. The writer Paul Tillich articulates the concept in this way. He says, eternal joy is the end of the ways of God. The message of all religions is that the kingdom of God is peace and joy. And it is the message of Christianity. But eternal joy is not to be reached by living on the surface. It is rather attained by breaking through the surface, by penetrating the deep things of ourselves, of our world, and of God. The moment in which we reach the last depth of our lives is the moment in which we can experience the joy that has eternity within it, the hope that cannot be destroyed, and the truth on which life and death are built. For in the depth is truth, and in the depth is hope, and in the depth is joy. Samuel Miller says, it is joy with great power. Dr. Thurman, in a passage where he tries to explain the meaning of Fellowship Church, says this: here at last I could put to the test once more the major concern of my life. Is the worship of God the central and most significant act of the human spirit? Is it really true that in the presence of God there is neither male nor female, child nor adult, rich nor poor, nor any classification by which mankind defines itself in categories, however meaningful? Is it only in the religious experience that the individual discovers what ultimately he amounts to? Our worship became increasingly a celebration before God of life lived during the week, the daily life, and the period of worship were one systolic and diastolic rhythm. Increasing numbers of people who were engaged in the common life of the city of San Francisco found in the church restoration, inspiration, courage for their work on behalf of social change in the community. Worship experience became a watering hole for this widely diverse and often disparate group of members and visitors from many walks of life. I return to my childhood again, my childhood church, First Baptist Church in Liberty, to Brother Oscar Hopes, who after every Sunday during the offertory would say, I know that my Redeemer liveth, for he liveth in my soul. What a fortress God was. The Redeemer was for this man, a fortress for the many battles that raged within him because of who he was and his position in society. And what a joy divine it was, this knowledge that gave him hope and affirmed his reality. He and the other folks at First Baptist Church floated the pain that they experienced on tranquil seas of the soul, transmuting the ugliness of segregated living to benedictions of grace, courage, and hope. They knew that they were held by that from whom all blessings flow, that which holds the amazing light in the nighttime sky and the blazing ball during the day, that which spread out the waters and the dry lands, that which loosed eroticism and love, and they were held by that. And what could be more affirming? What could be more validating, more powerful, more encouraging in their strives toward freedom? Worship there led to composure that held in its center a sense of joy, emitting assurance and power, faith and trust. It is the kind of joy that leans toward whole-making, a joy that centers and blesses. And there was a gentleness there, a gentleness so pervasive that it absorbed and transformed alchemically the hardness of life into harmony, abusiveness into affirmation, and racism into redemptive reassurance. Our communities and our world long for us, the daughters and sons of God, the benefactors of worship, to, with peace and joy and confidence, step forth and transform and make holy the streets of our lives. Martin Buber said, one should hallow all that one does in one's natural life. One eats in holiness, tastes the taste of food in holiness, and the table becomes an altar. One works in holiness, and he raises up the sparks which hide themselves in all tools. One walks in holiness across the fields, and the soft songs of all herbs which they voice to God enter into the song of our soul. And songs of worship, like lead kindly light amidst encircling gloom, lead thou me on, led the great soul, the Mahatma, on in the many campaigns that he waged. In fact, worship was a central part of his life. Daily worship. And sometimes the whole day was set aside just for his spirit to worship and to come into some greater understanding of who he was and what this great spirit of life was calling him to not only do, but to become. For Dorothy Day, the woman who started the Catholic Worker, worship Mass on a daily basis was central to her being able to deal with the problems of the poor, the hungry, the imprisoned in New York and elsewhere. And songs did visit those young people in worship in Alabama while they were being herded into paddy wagons and sent to jail. Songs like Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around became Thomas' anthems of resistance, courage, even revolution. King too said, even if God calls you to be a street sweeper, sweep the streets so clean that just like Beethoven composed music, as Michelangelo painted, as Shakespeare wrote poetry, so that the gods could say there was a great street sweeper. We're all called to do redemptive work. We're all called to surrender our beings to the achievement of this redemptive work. And worship readies us, sends us forth to this great work. So if we have in this worship experience, if we have participated in the strength and power of God, it is not sufficient for us just to talk about our feelings here in our worship experience. No, we're impelled to live it out in the larger world. To, in the words of Thurman, to find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoners, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among humanity, to make music in the heart. In worship, we come and we give praise and thanks for the many blessings we have received, for the moments of sheer beauty and the little graces that have held us and benefited us and encouraged us. We give thanks for the burning bushes in our lives that have gotten our attention and called us to higher resolve, and for the whispers of encouragement from strangers along the way. Some human, some creeping and crawling things. Here in worship, we deal with the mystery of birth and death, and the extraordinary thing between those two that we call life and its meaning. In worship, we tap into the legacy and inheritance of the universe, of those who've gone before us, who have taught us as the seeker after truth, that if we seek truth, somehow we will build stairs. If we don't find it in the way we want, if we don't totally experience this as we'd like to experience, somehow others will. They will ride upon the highways that we have created. But to come alive, as I am talking about, to come alive necessitates things dying in us. Old ways of living that deny our potential, our possibility, that deny our oneness and our unity. Old ways of thinking that build upon scarcity and embrace scarcity rather than abundance. Old ways of egocentrism and individualism that divide us from community. Indeed, it is only as we forget ourselves that we will live. That contradicts what we have been socialized into believing. We are socialized in believing, think about yourself. Rugged individualism. You have got to make it on your own. And even from a religious perspective, even here we emphasize our uniqueness, our special gifts and talents, and honing them, and that's very positive. But they are to be honed, not for ourselves, but for the glory of God, for the reconciliation and redemption of humanity, as Beethoven was able to do with his Ninth Symphony. We create not just for ourselves, but to save the universe, to save the world, to save humanity, to redeem, to restore, to bring to a greater sense of wholeness or holiness this world of which we are a part. April the 3rd, 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee, Martin Luther King was reflecting on his life, and this was the last address he'd ever make. And he remembered the time in New York City when he was autographing his first book, Stride Towards Freedom. Some of you have read the account. There was a demented woman, a black woman, who stabbed him in his chest. And the blade rested on the aorta. And it was written in the New York Times that if he had sneezed, he would have died, drowning in his own blood. And he received a letter from a white girl in the 9th grade from White Plains High School. And she wrote to say that she was so glad he didn't sneeze. So in this last address, King himself talked about how happy he was. The joy in his own heart, in his own soul, that he did not sneeze himself. Because if he had sneezed, he wouldn't have been around to see that marvelous movement of young people in 1960s in the sit-ins across the South that unlocked this idea of interstate commerce. He would not have been able to experience in 1962 in Albany, Georgia, where people who had been walking for years with their backs bent raised up and claimed their rights. Nor would he have been able to experience what happened in 1963 in Birmingham, the most segregated city in the nation, when he broke those barriers to segregation which led to the Public Accommodations Bill. And then later took a city, a small town in Alabama, Selma, Alabama, as the battlefield that led to the Voting Rights Act. If he had sneezed, he said he would not have experienced any of these things, and so he was so glad that he did not sneeze. For he had redemptive work to do. And I'm so glad he didn't sneeze. Because if he had sneezed, maybe we would not have made any of those gains that his creative and positive leadership caused. Some of us may not have been able to vote for a woman or a black man to be the presidential nominee of the Democrats. Indeed, the possibility of either running may have been seriously compromised if he had sneezed and therefore not pointed us as a nation to seriously examine the depth of our betrayal of our high principles and to reimagine our great possibilities. If he had sneezed, I would not have met him on a personal level. I would not have met this 20th century prophet who, like a burning bush, declared to me that God was not through with this world, nor was God through with me, and that I was being called to be an agent of God's redemption and reconciliation. If he had sneezed, what would be missing in our society? And when I think of what might not have occurred if he had died from that stabbing, I have to think about my own life and what I have brought to life. What works of redemption have I brought? Have you brought? What would be missing if you were not, if I did not exist, if I did not live? This does not have to be some great contribution. But the question is, what do I mean? What do you mean? What has been the effect of our living, my living, your living, with all the wonderful assets we have? What impact have we made on each other and the world? What do I mean to the world or to somebody in the world? What do I mean to my loved ones or to your loved ones? What would life be for them without you? Worse? Better? Your community, your church, the streets where you live. Better? Worse? Or would there be no difference at all? At the very end of the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus tells the 11 disciples to go into the world and make disciples of all nations. He was asking his disciples to become a community of aliveness, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And what did he command them? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. To bless the peacemakers, to bring good news to the poor, sight to the blind, open the ears of those who can't hear, to become a force of redemption, to bring about the new world, the acceptable year of the Lord. And he said, if you do this redemptive work, if you try it, if you commit yourself to being my students, that's what the disciples mean, to being my students, to tutoring yourselves and others you meet, if you tutor them in the Spirit, as I have tried to tutor you, if you tutor them to understand who they are and their possibilities, and they are agents of redemption and holiness and wholeness, the great Spirit, the great cosmic companion will be with you always, even until the very end of the world. In other words, the great lover of our souls will continue to love you and give you the strength necessary to do what you are called to do. Worship and redemption. Worship should lead us agents of restoration, of aliveness, of redemption, of whole-making holiness of the great love. And when we love so profoundly, we don't have to worry, because the God of love will be with us. To the end of the ages, to the end of our